Hello coaches, thanks for joining us for another Modern Soccer Coach interview. Joining us today is a man that needs no introduction, Ben Bartlett, Director of Methodology at Houston Dynamo. Huge amounts of experience in the English game as well. Author of two of the best coaching books I've ever read. I'm going to talk about them here. I'll put them on the link below as well. He's also going to talk about the Elite Soccer Coaching Award. I'll put that on the link below. Definitely check that out. Please, before we start, please like and subscribe so we can keep growing it and keep getting coaches like Ben on the podcast. Unbelievable insight. You're going to really enjoy this. Some really powerful thoughts around coaching. Here he is. Enjoy. Ben, thanks so much for joining me today. Again, on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to get you back.
Thanks, Gary. Great to be here. Good to see you again.
I'm going to start with, we had a quick chat off air there about your books, and I'll be the sad guy that brings your books up as proof that I am actually reading them. But your books have made a real impact over the last few weeks as I've transitioned to a new role and reading your books. And I told you a few of the impact they've had with me. Loving them, absolutely loving them. But I'm always interested when people are writing a book, especially a football book, on like, okay, where's this person coming from when they're putting this down? And it seems that with the language and where the book's taken me, it seems like there's a little bit of frustration from yourself in the way coaches are developing or the way we're thinking about the game as you're writing this book. So the first question I want to ask was, is there a frustration from your end, or is it more of a warning where you say, listen, if we keep going down this path, it may not be as productive as we want it to be?
Yeah, no, thanks. Appreciate you picking up the books. I thought it was only my mum that had bought them, so thank you. I think I guess frustration is probably a fair word. I guess across most of my jobs, there has tended to be a tension that has existed, and a tension that exists between, I guess, a sense sometimes of leadership feeling as if they need to control, and the best way to control is to command. So if everybody does the same thing, uses the same language, plays in the same ways, follows the same relatively rigid player profiles, that we have control. And I guess in a lot of cases, the reasons that people watch football, certainly the reasons that a lot of people play and coach football, is because of a lot of the emotional and the affective responses that it generates, the way it makes you feel, whether that's actually engaging in the sport or the other people that you're engaging with that are playing the sport. And I guess in most cases, football is probably one of the freer sports in terms of like the limit of the rules, very different from a lot of sports, particularly a lot of American sports at times, which almost suggests that the game was designed with a kind of natural freedom. Most people that engage in the game want to be excited and moved by it in a kind of emotional sense. And it's almost as if adults that often sit in ivory towers seem to want to over-constrain both the way that people feel when they're playing the game and the ability for people to play it in a way that will make other people feel really positive about it and drive it forward. So I don't necessarily know that would be me warning. It would probably be me suggesting that the game has existed for a whole range of reasons, and the reasons that people connect with it might not be some of the same reasons that you're trying to embed your control as a consequence of. So, and I guess I'm minded that at times demonstrating frustration is a good way of generating emotion, and sometimes to get people to think more deeply about what they're doing, generating kind of like an emotional response to, yeah, you're right, or no, you're wrong, and this is why I think you're wrong, can actually start the conversation to a more sophisticated level, rather than I either do that and I succeed, or I don't do that and I fail, which becomes quite a binary either or. You must do this or you mustn't do that process. So, I guess you've kind of, hopefully the books have done that in your mind, which is, if you've sensed that frustration and that tension, hopefully, not you explicitly, but it just helps coaches think about what they're doing and why they're doing it that way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I pick up on it. I feel as if we need that tension that you mentioned. I think we need that today, because I've struggled in a platform that started 10 years ago around putting stuff out and trying to be positive about stuff and trying not to be negative, because there's enough of that in the world. But then you want to challenge how people are thinking, and you've got to be really skilled to do that there. And I actually don't think I have that skill set or the decent capability of that skill set. you have a really good way of putting the words together in a really articulate way that we should be challenging how we're looking at coaching, and we should be challenging that ivory tower piece where it feels like, as much as there's so much variety and information, we're swamped with information today, absolutely swamped with tactical information, but yet we seem to be coming up at the same place. Every game model looks the same. Everyone's vision of the game, they want to press high. They want to build from the back. They want midfield progression. It's split into three. They're all the same. How have we got to a place with, surely we should have moved to more variety at this stage, but do you think that's groupthink, or do you think that's social pressure, or do you think where have we got wrong, I suppose?
Yeah, I guess it's probably a bit of all of that. There's certainly almost a need to conform, and a kind of sense that if you watch some of the best teams in the world and maybe some of the best players and the best coaches, that because they play like this, if we also try and play like that, we'll be amongst the top teams. And I guess some of those coaches and some of those teams have come to be at the top of the game by not doing what everybody else is doing in the first instance to get there. And then it's almost as if to be able to perpetuate our own success, we should do what those people weren't doing to get where they've got to by doing what everybody else was already doing, which just seems a little bit perverse. And I guess to your kind of point about the fact that we tend to kind of drown in information, but probably like have a famine of understanding. And I guess in every sense, trying to ensure that understanding begins with what's important here in this context, which I guess in a lot of other senses is like, why would we do it this way? And that should probably be assuming we're starting from zero, and no one's starting from zero, because you're starting with a level of experience and understanding, whether you've never coached a session before in your life or whether you've coached thousands. It's probably start with what's important in this context, and then how does that guide what I do? Otherwise, the risk is you will follow. This is what Pep Guardiola does. This is what Xabi Alonso does. This is what anybody else does. Antonio Conte done. Jose Mourinho, whoever you like. And I guess the interesting piece for me is when you look at a lot of the top coaches in various contexts, they don't play the game the same. Jose Mourinho is very, very different from Pep Guardiola in a lot of senses. He's different from Xabi Alonso. And I guess in some senses, some of those differences are quite nuanced and subtle. Some of those differences are significant. And I guess it's trying to ensure that we understand what's important first, and then look at what other people are doing to help understand why they're doing it that way, what's important in their context, rather than just looking at, they play with a 3-4-3, or they play with a 4-2-3, or the winger does this, or their fullback does that, and try to mirror it. And I guess also that there's also the challenge that the players that were developed to play in those systems, in many cases, weren't developing in those systems to be able to play in that system, which is almost like if we spend 10 years developing someone to play in a particular way, the risk is in 10 years' time, that system will now be redundant because the game will have moved on and we'll be copying someone different. So it's almost as if you're at risk of preparing people for a future that they won't exist in because it will have changed. And I guess in every sense, to your point about variety, without just being like, let's just throw some mud at the wall and see what sticks, but like intentionality around variety, more focus we can be on giving players and coaches a range of different experiences, but being intentional about the way that we support people to navigate those experiences, the more likely they are to be equipped for whatever the future may bring, whether you and I are here involved in that future, coaching it or not. I guess in every sense, and it's perhaps, I don't know if it's a cliche, but it's perhaps a little bit overused. It's kind of like leaving places better than when you started there, or people being able to exist beyond your tenure. And I guess in every sense, it's trying to ensure that the way that we run, you spoke off air about kind of like developing processes, and not processes in terms of I've got a spreadsheet, but like processes that genuinely support players to navigate the experiences that they're going to be exposed to, such that they can enjoy playing and they can meet whatever challenge it is that they face holistically, both from a technical and a tactical perspective, but also from a psychosocial and a biological perspective. And I guess the more we can come to think about that, I guess that's where some of my frustration comes, is that the game was built for the players. Our responsibility, assuming we have one as coaches, is to support the players to be able to navigate the game. That's what we should get busy with. And the more that we can put our ego to the side and think about what's important to us and focus our attention on the players, the more likely any of us as coaches are to become more eminent and prominent anyway as a consequence of the work that we've done to support the players to succeed.
Great start. The ego of the coach. I want to touch on that there. Sheridan Lindsay from Fulham was on last week. We talked about basically how sometimes fulfillment and enjoyment can drift away, particularly if you started on the wrong foot, which is the ego at the center of everything, which is natural when I look at it and I think, with my role now, especially, I'm thinking like, well, how can you develop people with that variety, but again, the intentionality behind it, and people who are committed to thinking a little bit differently, doing things differently. And then I think, well, again, processes in me always think, oh, is there something wrong with the process? And I wanted to ask your thoughts, and we talked a little bit about this last week with Sherilyn about, does coach philosophy, do you feel like that's the wrong starting point for a coach education, where it's a little bit self-centered, your view of the game, which, I mean, if you're 20, I go back to my 23-year-old when I started coach education, I didn't know anything about the game. Should we be starting at a different point? Should we be looking for more, say, exploration, more experiences, or how would we navigate around that?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I know Sherilyn well, and I was fortunate to work with him for a number of years and be influenced by him. And I guess, and certainly wasn't only me, but a number of the people that were involved in appointing not just Sherilyn, but coaches like Sherilyn, was a recognition that maybe having diversity in every sense was an important way to look. And a lot of Sherilyn's experiences weren't in academy football, but they came from a whole range of other contexts, which were really valuable to us at Fulham. I'm sure continue to be valuable to Fulham in terms of what he brings. So that's probably the first part of the answer. And I guess the second part is not explicitly speaking about Sherilyn, but speaking more generally about coaches. Is, I guess, firstly, Sherilyn comes from a perspective of not being focused upon his ego and what's important for him, but focusing upon what's important for the players. And I guess if you inherently have enough people that naturally live and exist like that, either because that's how they were brought up, because that's how they're genetically built, or because people have influenced them across their coaching career to think a little more like that, that's probably a good start. If you ask people, what's your coaching philosophy? I guess the risk is if you ask people what your philosophy is, people tend to talk about themselves. Part of that's probably about the nature of the question, and part of that's probably about the nature of the way that perhaps some people as coaches might think about themselves, and maybe think about what is it that your players are intending to achieve, what is it that they bring to the party. Because if our broad coaching philosophy is to best understand the players in our care and help them to succeed, and succeed might mean win the cup this year, win the league this year, succeed might mean still be planning 10 years time, succeed might mean make a connection with a whole range of different people that will be lifelong advocates, supporters, or friends of yours. They're all things that we could perceive to be philosophically important, and all things that we could perceive to be as wins. We've got a cup on our mantelpiece. It was successful. I've got these 10 people that I still meet up with in 20 years' time that I connected with when I was first playing soccer or football. And I guess if probably two elements to that. If we can first understand the people in our care and what's important to them and how we can then best attend and support to them. And then second, ensure that whatever game model, whatever player profiles we adopt, whatever training sessions we work at, whatever ways we measure from a metric or a broader kind of more subjective perspective as a reflection of what we're doing, can be embedded inside the nature of the individuals, the more likely that our coaching philosophy will be responsive, the more likely we are to develop the resilience in all of the people that are experiencing football to be able to sustain both their relationships and their success in the game over time. And hopefully more likely we are, going back to the earlier point, which is people find the game rousing, they're excited by it, they get a good effective emotional response when they're playing it, which again is a pretty important human quality, which sometimes get lost in the system of play, or how we're going to find somebody in the pocket on the half turn on their back foot. And I'm not underplaying the importance of those things, but I think if we focus disproportionately on those things, the risk is we miss so many of the other elements that form the kind of like the fabric of football that get lost in some of that disproportionate focus on tactics.
A couple of quotes from the book, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this here. This is probably my favorite quote. In a football sense, philosophies that are arbitrarily applied to people top down with a very specific season-long week-to-week periodization can be guilty of applying the conventions of education to the beautiful game and tarnishing its beauty to people who want to be free to enjoy experiencing football. And that really spoke to me about, you've mentioned about some people want to experience football with more freedom. But we're going in with this model or curriculum or whatever it is. Well, we'll define what that is. But I also wanted to get your thoughts on how we're presenting that. Is there a threat that, I feel like research and academic research especially is beneficial to coaches and all of us to get more information. But surely we shouldn't be in a rush to create an academia environment around football when my 8-year-old loves drawing, loves creativity, loves enthusiastic about 99% about everything in his life except school. He doesn't like school. So I think that, again, just my stage of my life, that's now speaking to me. Why are we seem to be in a rush to make the physical environment or the learning environment structured like the academic environment? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I guess I'm not. When I say we, I mean more globally, not you and I. But I guess we have been at risk of conflating education with learning, and I like you read as much as possible from as many different contexts as possible, and I'm certainly always interested to read academic papers. I worry a little bit that because of the natural hierarchy of the world, that the educational institutions control so many of the ways that we think, which might not be wrong if you want to learn about mathematics, or might not be wrong if you want to learn about biology. That doesn't necessarily mean that the systems and or the processes that work for learning algebra are exactly the same systems and processes that we should use to learn football. I also guess and this is a generalization, it probably doesn't apply to every single researcher that research anything from an academic institution, but at times academic institutions break stuff down to examine a smaller part of it before they piece it all back together. And the risk is that football certainly, and human beings, don't exist like that. As soon as you take one part out of the system, you're no longer examining the system. And if you cut a piece out and then try to stick it back, it still never quite looks the same, which is probably why we need to engage with as many different things as possible, but be really careful about saying, because this worked in an education setting, we should land it straight into a sporting context, because that might not work. I guess at times, though, we can be, I don't know, maybe blinded is the wrong word, but perhaps distracted by the ability of certainly harder sciences to be able to more objectify what is right and what is wrong. And in a world where grey is often a really difficult colour to navigate, if you can say it is this or it is that, it's black or it's white, it's perhaps easier to sell your point and to collect other people's hearts and minds in the absence of them already deciding what's important in their own heart and mind. And in a sense, I guess the academic institutions, who can probably articulate themselves well, come with some what might be perceived to be evidence, and also in their own sense being able to determine it as being peer reviewed, it's really difficult to then go, is that wrong? Because in many ways we're almost all, I guess, to the point about your son, is being socialized by those institutions such that you don't question them because you've existed in them in such a way. And that might or might not be, I don't mean that like, but that's a really subversive thing. I think it's just more a nature of the way that we go about our world. And so many of those things, I guess, to your earlier point, then just impact upon football. And we probably don't even do it consciously. We probably go, we have a curriculum in school that says at 9 o'clock on Monday we go here, and then at 10 o'clock on Monday we go there, and at 11 o'clock on Monday we go there. So we should do that in football. So at 6 o'clock you're in this practice, and at 6:15 you're in that practice, and at 6:30 you're in that practice. And when the AstroTurf lights turn off at 7 o'clock, we go home, which, yeah, is perhaps just, I guess, to your earlier point, the world just organising football like so many other aspects of the world. But what we don't want is where your son doesn't perhaps enjoy school. I'm not putting words in your mouth. We don't want children to not enjoy football, because all it does is remind them of some of the other environments that exist in that they don't inherently love.
Yeah. Put that alongside how we're then, as coaches, taking on information, where very, very binary, like you alluded to there, was is if something is this or if something is that, and you're saying the grey is complex. Well, understanding then that surely living in the grey is what coaching. The higher you go up, the more you realise that, from a personal perspective, the definites that I believed, and as part of my kind of inspiration and enjoyment around coaching, especially analysis. That's why I enjoy the analysis space so much, because I really loved having a concrete conclusion and then chipping away at trying to find the holes in it, and then realize in 24 hours that my conclusion was wrong based off 5 conversations, data, and 2 different views of the game. And I think that today, if we become so binary, as in, opposed versus unopposed, decision making, we were really, really good at finding the flaws in things, but it's almost like politics, where sometimes people are using that as selling points. Well, that doesn't work because of this. What's the better alternative? But that didn't work. That was really bad. And the conversation, like those conversations, I feel, are maybe social media helped produce that environment, but we're definitely not having that grey, I think, needs to be part of our culture over here, where it's okay to see a flaw, but then maybe you do this with different context. I guess a long-winded question of saying, how can you get coaches more into the grey or more engaged in that area and away from this or this?
Yeah, I guess the first element is that living in the grey is discomforting, which I think as soon as we accept that it's discomforting and we won't know, we probably free ourselves up a little bit to not feel as if we have to be right. However, I will certainly kind of caveat that by saying, certainly in a coaching environment, if you show too much weakness or too much uncertainty, that can be fairly damning for you, particularly if players have come from an environment where they've been conditioned to like certainty. And if you come with vagueness and uncertainty, it destabilizes you. So I guess we've got to kind of balance those things a little bit. And part of that is probably just, I guess, to some sense, being able to free coaches up a little bit to decide. And then it provides the platform for them to be able to navigate in the grey. And I guess like a clever person once said to me is, then as developers of coaches and developers of players, we should be just in time instead of just in case. So rather than filling them up with stuff that they have just in case this happens, our support is there just in time, just before they fall over, just before it gets so bad that they haven't got any support. And as developers of players or as coaches, maybe if we spend enough time with people and we help them to better come to understand what's important to them and then navigate it, that's better. That probably means, and people have often said this to me, they've certainly said it in this job and they've said it in all of my jobs, is, well, I can just do what I want then. Like, no, do what the players need. Well, what should I do then? Well, just pick something. Because when you don't know what to do and you've got a session to run, you pick something. And there's a decent chance that when you pick something, it will be a window into your eye anyway, which is you pick a particular session, you pick a particular way to set up your team, you pick a particular set of tactics and strategies that might help you to play a game or to win a game, assuming that's important in your context. And that's almost the reference point. But that's your starting point. And you can say, well, why did you do that? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the conversation can flow. And I guess your kind of earlier points about coach education, and the more we can make coach development about just in time opposed to just in case, the more likely we are to be able to be around people to come to understand some of the decisions that they're making and why they're making those decisions, such that we can support them. And then any resource that we go to, whether it is a hard and fast curriculum, whether it's go and watch the way that Pep Guardiola's team plays or Xabi Alonso's team plays, whatever it is that we guide them towards or they find on their own, are things that are interventions as a consequence of coming to better understand them. So rather than a top-down, everybody rain Pep Guardiola down on everybody, it's more of a response to, this is going to be important for people. How do we go about supporting them to better understand it?
Hello coaches, we'll take a quick break here. If you're enjoying this episode with Ben, I'm sure you are, and you want to explore more of the areas that we're talking about in greater depth and detail relative to your coach environment, please check out the Elite Soccer Coaching Award designed and delivered by Ben. We'll put the link on the podcast description below. Please check it out. You can download the brochure to learn more on the link below. Elite Soccer Coaching Award. Definitely worth checking out. Back to Ben.
Very interesting. So are you saying there that just in case, by having that approach, you're chipping away at the experiences of the coach, because that coach is not even getting into uncomfortability? Or if the coach is saying, listen, you're almost stopping the person from going anywhere and keeping them in track of being that mini-me version of what you want them to be, you let that go a little bit, and then maybe interfere or intervene a little bit further down the line. Is that what that means?
Yeah, and in some senses, I guess you've got to kind of understand where people are at. If you're a relatively young, inexperienced coach working in a first team environment, you might need a stronger belt and a stronger set of braces, because my experience has been that mistakes in those environments can be more terminal, because there's an expectation that you need to win today. However, in a world where coaches have developed for a whole range of different contexts, there's a decent chance that the skill that they've developed as a consequence of spending an amount of time coaching in a range of different contexts, and hopefully with a range of different people, such that they've had to adapt and adopt different methods based upon what people need at any moment in time, hopefully mean that the more experienced people become in a range of different ways, the more likely they are to be able to succeed when the temperature gets dialed up or when the pressure is perceived to be more important. And I guess that's why the more that we can see learning and development as an ongoing process, which is supported and understood, which is supported in the context the person's working in, and understood the things that it is that they're trying to work at, the more likely we are to be able to perhaps change some of those perspectives about education is something that you do just in case you need to know something at the moment that you need it. But you might have forgotten it because someone just in cased you 4 years ago, and you've forgotten, you've been to sleep a lot of times since that happened, and you've forgotten a whole lot of stuff. And I guess if you want to be able to get better at something, it's very, very difficult to adapt a skill or to adapt to an environment that you don't actually exist in or utilize, which is probably why just in time suggests that, okay, have you thought about this? This might help you with that. I've come to understand that you see the game in this way, or you believe this important, or you're working with players that are presenting with some of these characteristics. Have you considered these might be some strategies that you could utilize, and be around to help them? And I guess from a personal perspective, get lucky that some of the interventions that you make lead to some success. Because I guess in every sense, people will have engendered in them a great sense of trust or belief in what it is that you're talking about if they see it play out. And if they go, oh yeah, that worked. And I guess I've been lucky, which is you've made interventions and they've worked. Things have been successful. And I guess in every sense, lots of other people might have done some stuff that wasn't successful. They're probably more skilled in the experience than I am. They just weren't lucky in that moment in time, which is probably the bit that we can be as intentional as we like, but the game's the game. Sometimes the ball drops the right side of the line. Sometimes it drops the wrong side of the line. Sometimes the ref blows the whistle just in time. Sometimes they blow it just in case. And the luck of the draw sometimes just shapes whether you're successful or not.
Do you think that almost the next progression as coaches become a little bit more career oriented, definitely in this generation of looking for a move and seeing a little bit of movement in the marketplace? Do we think as if, well, if I don't have one, because you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, if I don't have one, am I at risk then of, if I don't have this clear idea of the game and I talk to someone at my club or the next job, or I don't have that presentation ready, I'm not getting that job, particularly if that is a data-driven club or something like that there. I guess my question would be, how would you advise someone to be a little bit more flexible but still have values that they stand by, or can they?
Yeah, I guess that stuff's really hard. And I guess another wise person once said to me that plans are bad, but planning is good. Which I guess having a 200 slide presentation might be really important for a particular context, but be careful that you don't get lost in all of this substance of the presentation, that you forget to present yourself in front of the players in a way that you can help them and support them. And I guess to some extent, the risk is that those presentations need to be both clear and distinct, as opposed to just being clear about what you stand for. And I think if you're clear about what you stand for, if you say you stand for adapting your response in a relationship to the things that are going on in a particular environment, it may mean that when you go for a particular job, I guess to the second part of the question, that you do something that is unique to that particular job interview that you're going to, which means you can still be held together by your big, broad values, beliefs, principles, pick whatever language you like. But the detail that you will go into, the specifics within the game model, the specifics in the way that you're going to play and coach, are as much a response to the human beings that are playing for that particular club at the moment in time, more than they are, this is how I do it. And in that sense, we can probably still demonstrate, articulate, speak to an owner clearly without necessarily needing to be really distinct about this is who I am, more this is who I will be in your context. And at times people can think that means that you're a chameleon, you blow in the wind, you don't really stand for anything. But I think you can say I stand for football being exciting. I stand for players being able to respond to a whole range of different circumstances in a whole range of different ways. And I want that to be kind of long lasting and to be resilient across time. And then start to speak about, well, with your club, I've got these players, and as a consequence, this is the way that I would play. And in some senses, going into those kind of job interviews, I think the more that you can demonstrate that you've done your research, that you know who the players are, that you know some history about the club, you know the direction that the club's seeking to move in, the more likely you are to be able to demonstrate, your own flexibility to say, this is who I'll be in your context. And then maybe what happens is you have, I don't know, the game model here at the club that I currently work at, that I've been fortunate to spend some time putting together, has got 7 pages to it. But that doesn't mean that the coaches that are working with players are working from 7 pages of my content. All that content does is provide some kind of guideline and backdrop, which means then you go into speaking to first team staff, second team staff, or academy coaches. They have the detail about what they're doing in their context, but they own it. But in some senses, it's been guided more by some of the bigger principles that are important to this particular club at this moment in time. So I think you can do both things together. We need to be clear about what we stand for. We need to be clear about the environment that we're working in and what that stands for. And as much as possible, in my best kind of David Brent version, try to blend and combine them together.
This is the $1 million question that it's so general. I apologize, but I got to ask it. Your experiences in America, like what? I don't even know what other to approach this, from player development or coach development. I guess maybe coach development. Like, how have you found? Again, we spoke a little bit off air, and we've got so much over here, so much, all the ingredients to get the meal exactly right. But every coach will say, we're not doing it right, we're miles. But every coach at every level will criticize, who's in America, will criticize what we're doing. How have you found it? What's your assessment of the overall landscape from a coaching perspective?
I think what's great from a coaching and a player development perspective is there's clear ambition. And there's resource in every sense, whether it's facilities, whether it's money, whether it's number of human beings. There's resource to actually support that ambition. And I guess there are many other environments, countries, backdrops, where they don't have either of those things. The ambition hasn't been generated, nor do they have the resource to realise some of that ambition. So that stuff's definitely good. I think the other thing that's good, certainly about the MLS, is I think, like we were saying off air, is our club plays currently in the Western Conference. There's 14 clubs in the Western Conference, and the top 9 make the playoffs, and you can't get relegated. Now, if they aren't a collection of ingredients that enable you to focus upon the way that you're going to play football and the way that you may support player development across time, I don't think there's a better set of environmental conditions to support that. So I think those things are really important, and probably really nice environmental conditions to support success. I guess in every sense, we've probably just got to get out of our own way and enable some of those things to be realised. My experience here has been that Houston is a wildly diverse city in every sense, which again, it's not like London because they're very, very different cities, but broadly, generally speaking, from a diversity perspective, if you want a particular type of human being, or you want a collection of different human beings coming together, cities like Houston and like London are the best environments to be able to have those. I guess it's then making sure, to the earlier questions, that the way that we approach coaching and playing football enables those diverse collection of individuals to bring their best to themselves, such that we can excite people, play front foot football, and enable the teams to get a little bit younger, a little bit more dynamic, and to continue to, I guess, attract people's attention to the game. I guess one of the challenges that I've perceived up till now is that there are a lot of systematic things that seem to get in the way. And a lot of those things are probably well-intended. Coach education in its kind of typical sense has largely been this is what a game model looks like. This is tactical periodization. These are your player profiles. And you almost stitch those three things into the players. You will play football like this. Your players will look like this. And as a consequence, your tactical periodization, your coaching process will look like that. And I don't know that no coach has examined their why, but a lot of coaches haven't examined their why. They've just followed, not necessarily blindly, but hard and fast, that well-intended lead. And I think for some of that ambition to be realised alongside some of the resource that supports it, the more that we can free people up to respond to what's important to Houston, to what's different in Los Angeles, to what's different in New York, to Minnesota, to St. Louis, to Orlando, blah, 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 pick your city, the better. And then you'll probably be less likely to look at the game and wonder who's playing against who today, but look at the game and be excited. And to find that blend between attracting the, I guess, of this generation, the Lionel Messis of previous generations, the Ibrahimovics, the Beckhams to the world, and allow those things to be coupled by some really exciting homegrown players.
Oh, cracking answer. All right. Elite Soccer Coaching Award. Obviously, yourself and Kevin have been working on this, and you're finishing the first cohort of. And I looked at the video Kevin sent over, and again, something jumped out to me. You said that a lot of coach education focuses on the what and the how, and not necessarily the why, which ironically you're just chatting about there. So talk a little bit about how you're trying to move the award and trying to do this in a way that can impact coaches.
Yeah, probably everything that we've spoken about up until now is hopefully a reflection of what we're seeking to do with the award. And I guess in a lot of senses, coach education, coach development has been about meeting mandatory standards. So you need this award to be able to coach in a particular context, which is excellent. It's great that football, soccer has over a number of years taken that step to ensure that if you put your son or daughter, or as an adult, you enter into any environment, that the people that are going to be supporting your development are qualified. They've been through a rigorous program of training. I guess sometimes though the risk is that you get a ticket that allows you to ride, but you don't actually know where you're going. And at times those processes are standardized, and they're standardized for good reasons. They're standardized to make sure that people meet a standard. But that is the risk with standardization, is that everybody just does the same without really understanding what's important. And I guess what we're trying to do with the award is to add another layer of contextual, thought behind what coaches do, which means if they've got a C license, a B license, an A license, a level 2, a level 3, a level 4, pick your way to organise a framework of qualifications, that this is just another way of navigating some of the things that we've spoken about, which the piece that runs central through the whole of the award is the process of assessment for each coach, and not assessment in the traditional way that I guess we spoke earlier, that perhaps the education system has made us think, I've got a test at the end of May, and if I pass it, I can progress to the next grade. More assessment about turning the mirror on yourself and saying, in this environment, what's important, and how is every decision that I make on every single day a commitment towards helping us achieve what we said was important, such that we can articulate, I guess, to your point, in a job interview, or to a friend, or to a parent, or to another coach, or to a player, whoever it is that we might have the fortune to engage with, what it is that we stand for, why it is that we stand for it, and how it is that we're going to use that experience and that depth of understanding to help that particular person on any given day. And the award then, I guess we could try and work from it is a course, but we try and work from the premise that rather than build courses, we build resources. So we enable the coaches to build a resource of a dossier, which they can present in the event they go to an interview, or that they want to present it to a group of parents. But also that the way that they shape that dossier is interfered with and hopefully contributed to by some of the core content that we've built, which is built into kind of like 4 elements or components. First one's about how we play. And I guess to some of the other points, it speaks about how we might consider the game from a more flexible, fluid, less rigid perspective, and enable the players to respond to some of the things that are going on in the game, but do it from a relatively flexible type of framework. The second aspect is to consider how we think about our players, how we develop our players, and rather than using rigid player profiles, profiling the players as they are, come to understand them a little bit better, build a profile across time of the things that are important to them and how our interventions and our work with them has supported them, such that in component 3, when you start to think about coaching sessions, game days, tournaments, game day interventions, all the type of things that we do as coaches on any given day, are in every sense guided and shaped and beautifully coloured by the way that we've come to see the game and the way that we've come to see our players. So how do we see the game? Who are the players in our care? How do we coach the game and support player development? And then the final component is to look at like measurement. And part of that is a relatively broad exploration of data and how we might use data, but more from a measurement perspective, look at whether or not we're doing what we said we're going to do, which might mean some of that does use hard and fast numbers of this is how much percentage possession, this is how many shots we had, this was our XG, assuming those things are important in your context. But also more broadly and perhaps in a more subjective way, look at if I said I was going to help this player get better at playing quicker, how have I helped them to do that? If I said I was going to help this player continue to stay in love with football, how have I done this? If I said I was going to explore opportunity with this player such that they can get some exposure to second team football or first team football or to a loan deal or whatever it is that you want, that how have my interventions supported the players to garner the experience that we've come to understand are important, such that those four components alongside the kind of assessment piece of the coaches building their dossier just helps people gain a greater sense of why they're doing what they're doing, but also underpins it with some of the how and the what. Because you just talk about why, I guess we can just end up looking at our belly button, which is not necessarily a bad exercise. But if we can't actually do anything as a consequence of looking into why we're doing stuff, then we'll probably always freeze ourselves on, that's a good idea, but I've got no substance to be able to underpin or make any progress with it.
Brilliant. Yeah, that piece on like trying to hold yourself accountable with your intentions, especially from a player development standpoint. I think we talk about next frontier being A, B, and C, and AI and all this here, but like to me, the next frontier is actually monitoring what you're saying there is those little things of we're really good at coaches, probably too good at assessing players where they are right now, but not really good at assessing whether we helped get them to wherever we did.
100%. And the players are assessing us every day, by the way, whether we like it or not. I guess the best way for us to be able to support them to have a positive assessment of us is for us to help them with the things that we said were important. And I guess in the end, like, words, but integrity is probably doing what you said you were going to do. And in most cases, regardless of whether, in my experience, of whether players and coaches go on to achieve the success that they aspired to, that their ambition encouraged them to achieve, in every sense, my experience has been that people won't hold you to account as long as you've done what you said you were going to do. If you've helped them optimally in the best way that you could along the lines of the things that you said you were going to help them with, most people sit comfortable with that and know that perhaps just a range of other things interfered with the capacity for them to achieve success. And I guess, I don't know, again, it's a generalization, but as coaches, we can often be quite quick to say, this player can't do this player can't do that, they're not very good at that. And those things might be true, but alongside recognising those things, it's important to also recognise, well, have we provided them with the platform and the opportunity to get better at those things? And then have we supported them across time? Because invariably, nothing grows exponentially. Players don't grow exponentially. They're going to have periods where they peak. They're going to have periods where they drop off. They're going to have periods when they plateau. And I guess in every sense, to your earlier point about your Bielsa quote about the guy that plans or the woman that plans can win, the guy or the woman that doesn't plan can also win, is trying to ensure that whatever it is that we've committed to isn't too readily derailed by a single outcome of a single game. That isn't to say that we shouldn't examine what we've done and whether or not what we did was right. But I guess if we've said some things are important, we probably need to stay the course with it. We probably need to hold our nerve with it through successes and not think that those successes came only as a consequence of what we said we were going to do, in the same way that the failures aren't only a consequence of us getting it wrong, more just the fluid roller coaster that is playing football.
Outstanding. When's it out?
We've run a course which started in March. That recently finished early in June, so that was the first cohort, and we were really fortunate. The guys at Elite Soccer have done a pretty incredible job in terms of helping piece it all together, trying to make this look as good as it can ever look, which is not an easy job. But intentionally, their support and their kind of drive and ambition around it has been pretty motivating. We had around 70 people that were enrolled on the first cohort, who came from a whole range of different places. We had some international coaches working with international teams. We had some coaches working in grassroots football. We had some coaches from mainland Europe. We had some coaches from the continent of Africa. We had some from Australasia and from the Americas. So I guess what has been really helpful for us in running the first cohort is we had enough people to learn enough, and we definitely had a diverse experience of people to check whether or not what we've built and what we've got is hopefully able to stand the test of time. And that's not to say that we've rolled it out once and we'll just rinse and repeat. There's some core elements that will keep the same and some aspects that we'll seek to adapt as we move forward. But the next course is due to start in September, with the idea of trying to run 2 cohorts each year, one that will start in the sort of late winter, early spring, one that will start in the autumn, which hopefully means wherever you are in the world, that hopefully if you enroll on the course and navigate it, you'll be doing it at a time that you're actually coaching and working with players, which hopefully means that you build and develop your work alongside the work that you're doing with your players and coaches, such that the two things are complementary. So, yeah, we've rolled out the first course. We've finished it. The feedback's been pretty positive. I guess it's just trying to now ensure it becomes a relative staple of the way that coaches come to think about their coaching.
Brilliant. Outstanding. Well, we'll definitely give it a push. We'll get it on the website and we'll get the links below, and we'll try and get as many coaches to it as possible. I'd love to check it out myself. Like I said, learning more about this space and I think your message, you'll probably think I'm blowing smoke, but I promise you, your message I think is so important in the world today, where everyone is moving in one area and are moving in one direction, and it may just be a good idea to challenge that there and to put some more diversity, like you said, on the table.
I appreciate you saying, and no doubt you'll be a great success at the new job, but I wish you all the best with it. Those things they're not easy spaces to navigate, and certainly commend you on committing to it, and no doubt you'll make it a great success.
Brilliant. Ben, thanks so much. Great to get you on, and we'll do it again for the hat trick.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you having me.